here in person. First, a little introduction about who Research IT are, who we are today. My name is Luis. I'm a graduate domain consultant in Research IT. I'm a graduate student in the Materials Science and Engineering department. We have Clint here, who's also a graduate student in domain consultant. Also helping us in person is Chris Bertort, who's an assistant professor in physics. And on Zoom, we have Amy Neeser and Mark Epstein, who are helping troubleshooting questions and troubleshooting things from folks. If you have any questions in the chat, please post them there. Folks will try to get to you there. If you have any questions in person, just speak out loud. As to who we are and what we do, we essentially help provide research computing technologies to campus, to the community, and consulting advice for helping people incorporate research technologies into their own workflows. We are in research teaching and learning, which is under the VC for undergraduate education. We're going to be moving into the VC research, if you're curious about that, over the summer. And our mission in general is to kind of extend the reach and impact on campus of all the kind of publicly available and nationally available research data and computing. So there's a lot of tools out there today that can help you do research. We're here to help you make that work. Today, being led by several consultants. You're the first kind of point of contact for folks who are trying to incorporate more of these tools into their own research. If you have further questions or further help you'd like to you can get help at our office hours. They're weekly, every Wednesday and Thursday, Wednesdays in the afternoon and Thursdays in the morning. You can also email us at research-it-consulting@berkeley.edu. If you're interested in joining as a graduate domain consultant, you can talk to us after, send us an email, or find a job description at this link, lee/rit-domain-consultant. In terms of our goals today, this is a tutorial on Visual Studio Code, VS Code. It's going to be a broad overview of a lot of the tools and functionality of this software. So we're going to learn what VS Code is and what Code Server is and what they can do and how they can help you in performing your degree-based research. We're going to learn how to use Code Server on Savio's Open OnDemand service. We're going to learn how we can kind of customize it to your kind of own personal workflows and like what all the steps might be involved in kind of customizing your VS Code environment into your perfect tool. You'll get a little bit of practice with some interactive computing via the Code Server and Open OnDemand. And we're finally going to have a little bit of the tutorial focus on using these AI LLM-based tools for coding, specifically GitHub Copilot and its integration in Server. First off, for those who don't know, what is VS Code?
Get started and drop.
VS Code is a text editing integrated developer environment tool. It lives kind of anywhere along the spectrum between a text editor, which just enables you to edit text on your system, in a full-fledged integrated developer environment. It came kind of as a new version of Microsoft's flagship Visual Studio integrated developer environment. What that means is kind of like a tool for coding that lets you run and program code and also interact with the code live as it is run. But truly, like VS Code is anything along the spectrum. You can use it just for basic text editing, and that can be the way you use it in the way that is best constructed for you. Or you can use as many fancy features as you'd like. And kind of this sort of customizability that has gone to be so popular and so widely used by a lot of programmers and scientists around the world.
And it's one of the best.
If you want to see it, it'll be great. And one of the ways we can customize it through many like layers of settings. So like all the settings are customized. And the other sort of main feature is to use the extension marketplace. So any features you like that aren't in VS Code, there might be a way to add it to VS Code. We're going to be working with Code Server today on Open OnDemand. This is a slightly different flavor of VS Code. And so here we have to get a little bit in the weeds of the kind of stuff. VS Code is the editor produced by Microsoft. It is open source software for Microsoft. It has a closed extension marketplace. It really doesn't come into play for many people. But it's like the core editor is like a desktop GUI interface, and it has like that marketplace integration that Microsoft runs. Coder, which provides the Code Server that we use on Open OnDemand, is an open source fork of the VS Code core editor. So all the same editing functionality is there. Instead of the proprietary marketplace that Microsoft runs, it runs a different OpenVSX extension marketplace. Many of the same extensions are available in both, but there might be some missing in one and not available in the other. And it provides the editor core and kind of a web interface using. But with that out of the way, kind of an introduction to what these tools are, and we go along and head to Open on Demand. We can access Open on Demand Savio via this link ood.brc.berkeley.edu. I'll also go ahead and get do my share in a second.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
First, there can take pictures.
It's okay to take pictures of the material. There'll also be a recording posted later online of the entire training.
You could access it?
Yes, it'll be access available on YouTube. Once you get to Open on Demand, you'll find a screen like this. Maybe you'll have to authenticate real quick. Should be again ood.brc.berkeley.edu. Once you're here, you get to VS Code. We can go into the interactive apps menu. And you will have a selection menu that looks like this. There's a variety of interactive apps we have in Open on Demand. You want to select your question.
Yeah, I'm just not able to log in, but
It should be your.
Did you get to CI login?
did I what?
No, you're on the green screen CI login.
Why don't you go ahead and I'll.
Like
Go on.
Lawrence Berkeley Lab, but I don't know.
Once you are on Open on Demand, into the interactive apps menu, and choose VS Code Server, the exploration debugging on free shared nodes, you'll open up a menu like this. This is the two ways to access VS Code on Savio. One with this exploration debugging option, it's not going to charge you any service units. We'll just kind of use VS Code on Savio for free. We also have a way to reserve a compute node for a partition of a compute node for your VS Code use. We'll start here on the exploration debugging version. And once you're ready, you go and hit launch. We'll bring you to a screen. We'll show a variety of things. I already launched some ahead of time, so I can go and get going. But you'll see something that looks like this. Something about an allocation that's being requested. You'll tell your job sitting in the queue. Once it is done sitting in the queue, it'll give you a link to connect to VS Code. You can hit connect to VS Code to go there. I'll go ahead and delete this right here. So once you're done using VS Code on Savio, we recommend that you delete it so that it's not using any of the resources. Let's see if you're sure. I already have a couple instances available. I'm going to connect to VS Code to my exploration instance, and while they're connecting, I'll go over a little bit of like the basic info. This is the basic interface to VS Code. On your first login, you'll probably see something similar to this. It might put you right into your home directory, Savio. If you've already used it before, it will put you into the last directory you used probably, or the last workspace that we're using. A couple things that are immediately available. You'll probably see some notifications that come up, giving you some warnings. You'll see a welcome screen that looks like this by default. You can choose to get rid of this welcome screen. Probably be kind of annoying. There's some useful things here. So they're always like linked to you the latest updates if they have any updates. We'll give you some pointers to like tutorials that you haven't done yet if you want you to learn a little bit more about VS Code. It also kind of give you like a list of your most recent kind of places to go. So if you are using a variety of workspaces really frequently, I'll give you a kind of a quick button to access those. If you lose this, however, you still like need to figure out more information about what's going on in VS Code. One of the most helpful menus is going to be this burger menu on over left over here. It might be on the top as these like file menus here. This help tab will show you a lot of useful things. It'll give you back this welcome page. So if you want to get it back, it will let you show it up again. And it'll also give you menus for kind of showing off all the different features of VS Code. There are sort of links to like tutorials and resources from Microsoft on using VS Code itself. It'll give you a list of all the commands that you can run with the keyboard shortcut. It'll also get to tell you a little bit more about VS Code itself. One of the primary features of VS Code is that it will let you do basically everything with the keyboard if you are like willing to learn many shortcuts or customize it for yourself. So if I hit show all commands, it'll open up this command runner at the top. It's going to give me a huge list of all these sort of things. So you can do all these sort of things in VS Code, assign them a keyboard shortcut. You can access this as well by pressing F1. So you can access it through the menu. You can access it by pressing F1. You can change that shortcut if you'd like. But anything you can do in VS Code, mainly using the mouse or by editing, you can use with the F1 shortcut. Let me get back to full screen. You can also customize the kind of the way this basic interface looks. And so up in the top right, you'll have a way to customize the whole layout. But you can toggle all the primary bars. So if you don't like the sidebar showing the file system, make that go away. If you want to see this interactive terminal panel, you can make that come up. You want to see the secondary sidebar, which in this case is Copilot chat. You can make that come up as well. You can make all these sort of things go back and forth. On the left-hand side, you'll see a lot of menus over here. This first one is the file system menu. You also have a search. You search all your files for strings. So if you have a big code base and you want to see like, where do I call this variable, you can search for it there. You can control like all the folders it looks into. You have the source control menu, which will let you kind of integrate with Git repositories. And there's like the run debug, which will let you kind of run interactive code and debug it live in the IDE. There's an extensions menu. So it'll connect you to the extensions marketplace. And there's a variety of other things that might be installed on VS Code. Here we have the continue service and an R service. Add things and remove them from this interface by right-clicking on that leftmost bar.
You put those in as default.
Yes, continue and R are included on Savio's installation of code.
Yeah.
But we can also add in other extensions that might show up as an icon over there.
Continue.
Continue is a service for interacting with some large language models in AI. I won't do that right. Those are kind of the basic kind of UI overview. Again, if you are ever kind of looking for something, I would recommend going to the help menu. It'll show you a lot of things. In particular, the command menu will give you many options to kind of see like what I want to do. If I want to open a file, it'll give me all the things that might open files. It will try to search in the most friendly way for you. It uses a lot of fuzzy searching things. So if you have things that look like the words you're typing, it'll try to pull that up for you. I'll start searching for things, ask it questions, sort of like in this little search bar. But to that, let's start talking about kind of how the file system works, how to integrate that. So right now I have the file system tab open on this bar. We can open a file with the command runner. So I can file open, I can choose a file. I want to go into here. I can open up this readme.txt text file. It doesn't say anything really big in that. I can open it there. I can also open a preview of that file by clicking once on file system. If I click once again somewhere else, it'll get rid of that preview. So if you're trying to look for a file that you've like lost or like that you don't quite remember like which one's the right one, it's a quick way to kind of check things. When you double click, it'll open it for real. It'll open a real buffer for it. And if you single click, you can start looking at buffers or everything else. You can also open files twice. You can open it into a second buffer. So if you drag, you can open up two panes of this. So if I were to add many lines of text here, you can see what the benefit of this is. Maybe if you have a really long file, you want to edit it in two places at once, or just have a reference or some functions that are at the top. This is a really useful way to code. You can create many versions of this. You can up and down. You can have 4 of these. I think you can make like probably 16 of them. Like there's a lot of variety here. Depending on what looks best to you is available there. Once you can drop it back in, you'll combine those buffers again, so you only have one view. There's also shortcuts to split the panes. So that is a really useful way to look at multiple things. You have many files open. So say I open up this matrix multiply script, this other don't read me text that has nothing in it. We can see all the files with this open editors menu. And this will give us an easy way to kind of see what's in all the groups. So I can move this matrix multiply into group 1 instead. change the order of stuff. It'll tell you what folder it's coming from if you have many folders that are open in your workspace. And if you want to close everything, clear stuff out, start from scratch, you can close all the editors. So that's another useful part of that menu. With folders, you can also open folders from the corner. You press Control K and Control O to do that. I wanted to do that again. Sorry for the full screen since I keep escape to get out of the camera. If I want to open a folder, again, I can just type it here. It'll find the open folder command for me. It'll tell me what the keyboard shortcut is. So if you're also looking for things, many of the menus will tell you what the keyboard shortcuts are along the way for things that you use a lot. I can open a folder. I can go into this VS Code tutorial folder, and I can choose this basic UI file system tour as my main folder. It'll refresh the page often when you switch workspaces. That's something to get used to. It'll choose that folder by itself. I'll stay actually out of full screen for this portion. No, quick question.
Oh, it refreshes the page because the left part is like, because you click like open folder, right? But then is it like, now is that folder now the root kind of? Like, why is it just like a subdirectory without refreshing?
Yes. What happens when you open a new folder? It does become the new root folder for your workspace. This also happens, I'll show you right in a moment, like what will happen when we use proper workspaces, quote unquote. If you wanted to look at two folders, for example, we can do that. They don't have to be in the same home directory. Whenever VS Code needs to reset the root directory, it'll refresh. It'll reload the window usually. On the web interface, it refreshes the browser. On like the desktop version, it just refreshes the thing.
But the connection to the server stays, it's just the browser.
Connection stays totally fine. And in fact, if I close the tab, I go back to the OOD page, and the connection will be there until you delete it.
Server to the desktop version.
I don't know off the top of my head if there's a way to put the web server to the desktop version. That we are like, there's tunneling and remote SSH possibilities that you can usually do with VS Code remote. But for security reasons, we don't support that on Savio. But going back to the kind of file system workspace sort of tour, if I wanted to open up a second folder and not have this first folder go away, I can open up and add a folder to a workspace. So here I went to the file menu to do this. I went to file and add folder to workspace. It'll give you back a list of folders. It'll start where I'm currently in or where maybe I last was. So I want to add the next portion of the demo to this workspace. I'll add the IDE folders folder here. And it will refresh again. And we can add as many folders to this workspace as you like. Usually after the first folder you add, when you create a workspace, it will stop refreshing so often. These folders don't have to be in the same root folder. They can be anywhere in the system. They can be nested in each other. And it'll show up in the order that you have here. We can keep adding folders to this. So if I wanted to add a folder to Scratch, for example, I could go to my Scratch directory. Will ask me if I press that. So you can see that I mistakenly added all the user folders, but it'll let you add many folders. It won't let you edit files in the places that you don't have added, so don't worry about doing mistakes like that, like I just did. If you're ready to save the workspace, you can save the workspace as a file. And it will, by default, share this, save the workspace as a file. It's kind of a settings file. It's a really nested location. It's kind of like way deep in your home folder. You can save it anywhere though. So I'm going to go back to like where this demo folder where we have been is. Save it into this workspaces folder. And save it as test workspace.code-workspace. And if once we name it, it's going to refresh again. Question while you were.
Folder, and I guess like what does make a folder a workspace?
Yes. The workspace is a collection of. Ooh, the name got mangled. The workspace is a collection of folders and settings. And so you can see here, I have all the folders that are part of this workspace. I edit it in the file. I've removed that users folder just by editing in this file. And I have a list of settings here. And so I'll show you guys more in a moment after kind of getting through sort of file system stuff. But I can edit the settings locally in the workspace.
How did you open the workspace file?
Yes, I chose the location I saved it to be a little bit clearer spot. But if you know kind of where it was saved, you can just open the file. By default, it saves it in kind of like a weird nested spot. If you try going to the menu, you can open workspaces from file, and it will go to where you last saved them by default. So you can probably find the workspace from there. By opening it, just I happen to new location. Are there any other questions at this point? Some of the things I mentioned that this is a kind of that much of the VS Code is kind of can lean anywhere from text editor to a full-fledged IDE. You may never use all the super fancy features of VS Code and maybe just use it as a really nice text editor. Some of the things that are really nice are easy to see and play around with in this editor playground. And so if you're still getting used to the keyboard shortcuts, don't know what you can do, I recommend like going to some place like this, like doing a tutorial like that. So I'll demonstrate some of the stuff here. Real quick. It's a kind of built-in editor playground. It will kind of mention all the things that you can do, some examples of like ways you can edit files here. So for example, it shows that I can do a box selection. So normally when you click and drag, it will kind of drag all the way. Hold Shift and Alt, it will select a box. So not in the end of the line. Maybe that's a nice way for you to grab the functions of the code. So if I let go of Shift and Alt, and we click it, you can see maybe the difference in that selection style. We can add multiple cursors. So many like traditional ways only have one cursor for editing text. You can only edit text in one place at a time. We can add multiple cursors. You can do it two ways. You can, it shows here, hold Control Alt and one of the arrows or down, and add a cursor above and below. Now I can edit text in 3 places at a time. And that can be really nice for you. One common thing that I usually do, it says to me that this command is unbound, but I know it's Control D, or at least one thing that also does a similar thing is Control D. Select all copies of the same text. So if I select background color, you can see that's already kind of pre-highlighting the next 2 background colors. It's telling me where that variable appears again. Press Control D, it will place a color or a cursor at every location where that string appears. And I can delete it all at once and then rename it to say foreground color. This is not valid CSS, but I'll normally use CSS. You can see that it also has.
I just had a question regarding the Control D thing. Is there a way to make that apply to every file in your repository?
Yes, we'll actually get to that at the bottom of the playground. You see that we also have like kind of shortcuts for like IntelliSense. So this kind of auto predicts for what types of things you might want to do. Here it says Control Space this shortcut. It will, if you have an extension or some features. So for JavaScript, it kind of has the same natively. For Python, it has this kind of natively. It will kind of look at your code base and see like what are the possible, say, methods I can add here. So give me a list of all the methods and a little bit about which arguments they might have, and give me an option to choose that instead of having to remember it. Default. You can act on whole lines at a time, so I can move a line up and down with up and down. You can delete the whole line, Control Shift K. I can copy a line times with Shift Alt up and down. And so if you're making like very serial edits here or very like common edits to your code, these are all things that you might use daily in terms of like moving around, moving lines around, doing weird things that might have been like really laborious. This rename refactoring is the question that was asked in the room. Can we rename a variable across the whole workspace? Yes. Here it's bound to F2. So if I highlight F2, if I select it, or highlight book and I select it and hit F2, it'll ask me to rename it. So I want to rename book to novel. I can preview that rename, and it'll pull up a menu like this. It told me all the places this variable shows up in the code base. Here it's looking at the actual little snippet of text, and it'll apply that change if I accept it. And it will search all the places And you can even search in this side menu to do a very similar thing. Some last things, there's like some auto formatting stuff that might be useful for you if you want your code to look nice. You can fold large sections of code. So if you have like a big function that you don't want to see all the time, you can do this sort of stuff and fold that, move it out of the way, see just the header of that function. It'll print out warnings and stuff, and you can navigate to all the warnings and errors in your code. Warnings is also useful, and I don't personally use it a lot, but when it happens to me, it's really nice. There's like little snippets that you can program. These are all customizable, but there are some default ones. For example, here is a try catch block. Start typing try. It'll give me a little menu of things they might think I'm trying to do. One of the things is this try catch snippet that is auto-programmed. And it'll put all the boilerplate code that to make that sort of code happen. And so learning all the shortcuts, learning all the things that you can do can take a really long time. I learn new shortcuts every other month. Like using it for VS Code for maybe 6 or 7 years now. There's like a couple ones I use all the time, and that make my life really nice and easier and things. There's often a ton that I never quite know. And that's okay. You don't have to use all of them. You can always reprogram things to make it work for yourself. I like printing out like there's a reference sheet you can find for all the keyboard shortcuts. I like printing that out and putting it next to my computer when I'm learning VS Code, programs like that. It was helpful for me when I started out. But that is kind of the basic editing and use of the file system and kind of navigating around the UI. We're going to move on to some of the like basic IDE features. Are there any questions?
What's the difference between the meaning of the word playground, sandbox, ID?
Playground here is just kind of like a name for this little tutorial they have. The IDE sandbox is like a term often used for like programs where like this is an isolated environment. And the IDE here is stands for Integrated Developer Environment. It is kind of named for kind of a class of tools which you use edit code, run code, inspect the results of that code live. And so we'll see a little bit of that, really kind of like what that inspecting live. Yes.
Yeah, two things that maybe we'll get to, but is there a way to get it set up so that you can just like use the play button to run a script when you're writing like a Python program in this code in here?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a way to do it. There is off the top of my head, I know there's a shortcut that I accidentally hit a lot of the times that to send a Python script to the active terminal. On a compute node, maybe that is like a nice thing to do. If you're doing some debugging stuff, there is ways to kind of handle it there. The time we are doing pretty good. Yeah, absolutely. There's a way to kind of like just pop things in there. You can always add a shortcut here yourself.
Yeah. And also with this, so it seems like you'd be able to like make plots and then instantly like look at them in VS Code. Are you able to like open images?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll see some stuff similar to that when we're looking at notebooks, but you can render PDFs here. There's an extension for that. You can render images. Images are natively supported. PDFs were not, at least beginning, might still not be, but absolutely.
Cool.
One of the things that makes this kind of flavor of an integrated developer environment, an IDE, is kind of integration with code repositories. If you aren't a user of Git or of code repositories, they're a way to kind of keep track of versions of files in kind of a consistent way, in a way that helps you collaborate with other folks in particular. Often Git is the main tool, Git. It's a very popular tool that kind of began in like the open source community working on the Linux kernel. I will show you what a repository is real quick. I'm going to first open this folder. I have a pre-made one in case we were running too slow in time. We should be okay to show this. I'm going to open this folder. It's an empty folder. There's no files in there right now. If you had a Git repository that was already set up that you cloned from a repo, you could always see the history straight up. But if you had a new repo, this will let you initialize a repository. So I'm creating a history, a way of tracking the history of all the files that are in this folder. I'm going to go to my file system, create a new file. There's readme text. Say hello. I'll make the text a little bit bigger. You'll see now on the left-hand side, I have a little notification badge on the source control page. Look at that. What it's telling me is that I have the README file has been changed. It's currently untracked, is what U stands for. And if I wanted to begin tracking the history of that file, I can hit plus. It'll tell me that I've staged the change. I'm going to hit this add message here to say initialize repository and add that file to my repository. I hit this commit button, it's going to give me an error. I haven't configured my username and user email in Git. There's a way to set this globally across all the repositories that you use on a system. But I'll show you how that looks like just for a single repository. If you open up the terminal, I did this with control and the backtick. You can also do it with control and J. I'm going to config my username, my name, Luis, and my email to my email, luisrd@berkeley.edu. And now I'm allowed to commit this file. You can see that at the bottom I have this graph. It says this little point where I've initialized the repository. If I've clicked this, get rid of this terminal so it's on our view, to show me what happened in that commit. I added a line to this file. I added that file to the repository. If we were to go back to the file and look at this timeline menu, you can see that we have that Git timeline also in this file system name. It shows me that I've initialized the repository. It also shows me that I've edited and changed. And so you can see a lot of these concurrent changes happen in a lot of places in VS Code. And so if I were to add an edit here, some text to that README file, a couple things happen. You can see that the file has been saved. It'll tell me that in just the timeline, the VS Code source control menu, the VS Code source control menu, it'll show an M here to indicate that the file has been modified. In the buffer itself for the file, you see this green bar on the left-hand side, showing me that lines have been added to there. I can say add text, commit, and commit that change. Telling me that I haven't staged this commit, so I can now stage it again. If you're working on multiple branches of this repository, you will see a history that looks a little bit more full-fledged. And so I had a repository I made earlier. Imagine that I had another feature, maybe another person was working on the same base of code, and they had a feature that they added to this README file. I didn't have, I needed to merge that in. You'll see information shows up here in a branch. And so this is a good visual way to learn how to use Git and to use Git if you're used to the command line or haven't used Git at all. You can see in this history, I can kind of go back and see all the changes. So I merged branches here. In this feature branch, I changed hello to greeting. In this one commit, I went from README file to text file to README. So that's one of the features that makes this an IDE, working with different repositories and giving you kind of integration of that. You can pull automatically from repositories and also configure it to push automatically. So if you're working code with people, you can integrate it with GitHub or GitLab or whatever else. Another thing that you can do is kind of do some live debugging. And so in this debugging folder, I have a short Python script. This Python script doesn't do that much. It has one function with a kind of a match case structure. It has two inputs to that. You just want to run through it.
So you're switching away from talking about Git to talking about debugging?
Yes, talking about debugging. Yep. I wanted to kind of like run this code live. I could open up interactive terminal. I did this with, again, control in the backtick or under the tilde. If I wanted to load the Python module, so I'm in Savio, I'm on a node. I can run this debug function, see what prints out. I'll run the whole script. If I wanted to kind of run it interactively and kind of step through and see what's going on, when I go over the line numbers, you'll see these, it'll give me an option to add a breakpoint. And so here I can go into the debug menu. I can run a debug. First time you'll do this, it'll ask you to set up a configuration. I'll choose the Python debugger. I'll debug the currently active Python file. It will launch this terminal. Let's see. apologize, I'm running into a couple issues. Um, Just for that, I might have messed up my configuration between when I tested this earlier today and now. But if it was running correctly, what you would be able to see is a menu at the top and let you step in and out of code. So maybe if you've used MATLAB before, it'll show you a way to kind of step into functions, step out of functions, step over things, continue between breakpoints. It'll show a menu on the left with all the variables that are active. If you were running the script and if it was kind of catching up, it would give you a way to interact with all the active variables. In the debug console, you'll be able to change the value of variables. You can also watch variables. Let me try this one last time.
You're doing great.
Last sort is always loading the window. Often, if this code gets caught on something weird, reloading it can help. Maybe this time I won't. Otherwise, when you're on kind of the code server instance, you are on a Savio node. You can do all the things you can normally do on Savio nodes. You can run code as what we did in the terminal. Here we go. And so this is kind of what the debug menu looks like. It's giving me a first issue that I don't have this NumPy file in the basic module. I can step over that. That's before it edited out. So it'll show a lot of things like that and give you kind of an interface to work with the live version of this person. You can do all the Savio things again. And so get rid of that debug terminal and just go to my home directory. I have in here a job shell function. It was me testing the service hours calculation. It sleeps for 300 seconds. I wanted to submit this to the queue. You can do so with sbatch. So one of the ways that might be nice for you is to kind of work interactively on your job submission scripts. You need to use them. Just submit from these kind of VS Code. So it'll submit there. If I were to load queue, inspect my current jobs, you'll see things. You see the active VS Code job here at the top. See the VS Code one that I'm going to move into shortly. You'll see this SU test for March that I did. Is the name of that job pending that I just. You also access the data transfer nodes via this VS Code interface. When you're on Savio, you can kind of SSH between any of the nodes that you currently have a job allocated on, login nodes, and the data transfer node. If I were to SSH into ETN01, I'll pop onto the data transfer node if I wanted to do some data transfer, organize some files, move in somewhere else. I could do that too. In terms of kind of customizing, so we kind of over a lot of the features. Before we talk about kind of interactive computing, talk a lot about how to customize VS Code, like all the various ways you can do that. The kind of basic way is just editing the settings. So there's a variety of ways, as you've probably figured out, to access the settings in the same way that you can do most everything in VS Code in a variety of ways. You can go through this gearbox and get the settings menu. You can do the control comma shortcuts. You can go into the command runner and type settings. Give you a variety of ways to open settings. So I'm going to open the settings. I'm going to open the UI version. And it will just give me a menu with a bunch of settings. And the first thing to note here is you'll see 3 categories of settings. You see user settings. These are attached to your user. Remote settings, these are attached to the code server instance. And the workspace settings, these are attached to the current workspace you're in, if it's like a formal workspace, or the folder, if it's just kind of like a temporary workspace. On the desktop version of VS Code, the distinction between user and remote is a little bit more clear, since the code server, you're kind of always remote. And so those are kind of at the same level here. But typically, your workspace settings override your remote settings, which override your user settings. So you can have different settings per different folder. So if you have, say, 2 projects you're working on, and you want things to be a little bit different in one versus the other, you can customize your settings via the workspace settings and attach it to those projects. If you have a lot of settings that you've played around with, fine-tuned somewhere else, you want to show someone, or you want to kind of like save the version of that, you can also save it as a profile. And so the profiles menu are kind of like a collection of settings. So the way that Workspace was a collection of folders and settings, profile is just a collection of different settings. So the combination of settings you have here. This default profile is the one that I'm currently using. It's associated with all these folders. And so you can associate a profile with the place you go to on VS Code. And so say if you're opening this folder, opening this project, I want to use this connection of profile, you can do that sort of thing there. The settings are the main way to interact with stuff. The other way to open up the settings is just you can manually edit stuff. And so this is kind of like where once you get comfortable really digging at the internals of VS Code, things might start going really fast. You can change, again, basically any feature, any function of VS Code in the settings file. You can see right now I have these 3 rulers in my editor. Little vertical bars indicating where 80 characters, 100 characters, and 120 characters is. I get rid of one just by editing that line in settings file, saving that file. It'll disappear. It'll update live. What I can't do right now is edit the font size in the editor because it's being overridden by one of my other settings. And that's easiest to see in this sort of UI menu. So this is a tricky part of working with all these settings files. If you have many things going on at a time, it'll indicate that it's also modified somewhere else. If I go to remote, it'll tell me it's also modified in user. These are conflicting. If I were to change this 14, then the text will show a little bit bigger.
Wondering, files like this, on other systems, I'm worried about accidentally like messing something up in here and not being able to revert it. Like, does this save some like? Can you edit this in a way that totally breaks things? And if so, is there a way to go back?
No. It's hard to really break things because you can always recover a default settings file.
Okay.
If you were to have this be empty, it would be the default settings.
You think changes the workplace, but can you sync it to GitHub or something?
Should do so if you like to do it yourself. Depending on like what settings you have in there, maybe you will want to do that. Would want to do that. In terms of the editing system, you can always also go to this timeline and see what happens there. And so that timeline will be stored for quite a while. So you can see 1 day, 3 days, 4 days, a month ago, we'll have versions of that on the code server. So it is kind of hard to break the settings. It is a little difficult to see like when you have conflicting settings, like what is kind of the issue. The other sort of thing that you would use to customize VS Code is the extension. So this is probably a much more heavy-handed way to customize your VS Code. Instead of just changing the way things work, you're adding new functions. The extension marketplace, there's a lot of things. Some of them are just color themes, like the coloring style of your interface. Others will do like more powerful features. And so you can install things pretty easily. So I've installed this tab out one. It is an extension. Let's see tab out of open brackets. If you're a search tab out in your extension and you want to add it, you can just install it. It's a quick thing. It shouldn't require reload even. What it lets me do is when this is when I have pairs of brackets like this, I can hit tab 2. Tab out of that. If that was instead of adding a tab space. With extensions, you can kind of choose when they are on and when they are off. And so here, if I wanted to kind of temporarily disable tab out, I could disable it globally. I can also disable it at the workspace level. So maybe you have like some language features that you don't want to be using in a particular workspace. You can disable it. Maybe it'll require reload. It'll tell you about that. I reload the window just now. Will take into effect the disabling of the tab out. And start adding tabs again instead of keeping it out of the bracket. And just again, as a note here, the VS Code desktop version and this code server have different extensions and marketplaces. Most of the time, it's pretty similar. You'll see the same things in one place as you do in the other, but you might be missing a couple of little things in this code VSX. I will now move into the interactive computing portion. And so on this one, I should be on a server. Here, and so kind of demonstrate the difference, I'm going to go back to Open OnDemand. When you are requesting VS Code server, you can request shared exploration debugging one that we've been on so far. Also request a compute one. There's a couple extra settings here that you might want to choose. You can choose the partition here and how much time and what account you're charging to. So this will charge your hours. It also asks you to choose a list of modules to include that will be default loaded into your Slurm environment or to your node environment. Right now I'm choosing the Anaconda 3 module to give me Conda access, the R module, and the Julia module to kind of show you guys interactive stuff. But I, again, already have a server running. I'll connect to my compute server. This might take a little bit longer to queue than the debugging one because you're requesting a little bit more resources. But by default in this environment, I have modules loaded that will let me compute. You can kind of do, again, all the things that you normally do. So I have that matrix multiplication script here again. It chooses two matrices and multiplies them. I have my Conda environment loaded. I can activate my Conda environment. I can run these sort of code interactively. So I can Python matrix multiply. And see what that script does. I can also use srun for that script. So it's kind of as if you are in a job. There's a little bit of nuance with using srun when you're on the compute node. Instead of just srunning, so say I want to srun, use 8 cores, run Python. Natively, this will kind of break a little bit on VS Code. You'll see what error comes up with now. Give me a weird exec VE.
You mistyped Python, so you're getting a different error than you expected.
Still, yeah. The trick to doing this on the code server is to add this -- export equals all. This is just like a little thing you have to do here that you don't normally have to do when you're on an interactive job. And then it'll let me do that again, run the script as normal. So that's just like a little thing to keep in mind. To use that export equals all. We can also use for notebooks in VS Code. So here I have a notebook that is just plotting a sine wave. These notebooks are really fully featured in VS Code. This kind of has a big priority in terms of Microsoft prioritizing this. It'll let me choose any of the Python environments, or in this case, Julia is also available. I can choose one of the ones I have. It'll look for Python environments pretty well, but you might have to install an environment. But I can load up this RT tutorial environment. And then once I have a kernel selected, I can start running my notebook. And you'll see there's a couple of things. It will save all the output from the notebooks across time. So if you've already run it before, it will have the output already there. You can see now that it's running, you can see a little bit of timer running on that first cell. If I want to figure out what is currently running, I can hit this go to button. I could interrupt notebook, I could restart it. And so if I were to try to force interrupt things, okay, I have this kernel that is, or this cell that is running for 60 seconds, just not doing anything. You could stop the progress of that cell with things there. You can also see all the variables that are currently open Jupyter across your various cells. So this is a kind of, again, another pretty fully featured way to look at things. With Julia, it's pretty similar. You can use it in quite the same way. In terms of like looking at figures and plots, you can save them kind of directly from the notebook. And if it's live, you can also open it up in kind of its own like render and play around with it there.
Cool.
In terms of using R scripts effectively, the only nuance really here is you need the R module loaded when you are loading up VS Code. So when you ask for the compute job, you have to have the R module loaded. And then the way the interactivity works here is by starting an interactive terminal. So I will look in the command menu. I always forget this one. I don't use R very much, but I'll create an R terminal. once that is loaded, I can start sending code from this R script into that terminal. It's just like a example script from Microsoft. I didn't write this. And it'll start going through all the things. It is a basic sort of model that is, it'll open up plots to here too. And so there's also a way to kind of, on the command line, interactively have terminals that pop things into the kind of main viewing area.
Could not find our path.
Yes, and so
Why'd you load up?
if you are not on the compute job,
Hmm.
if you module load in the terminal, it's like not it's hard to get VS Code to recognize like what's happening in that terminal.
Oh,
What's the way to kind of the easiest way is like on the compute job to load that advance.
oh,
I don't quite remember.
Interrupt here.
Let's go for it.
I'm gonna fix the VS Code interactive app so that you can load modules. I
okay.
just need to do a little bit more configuration there.
So loading it in the terminal is not the same thing as preloading it in your job.
No, there's like a little bit of there's like a way to kind of like strongly link the terminal state and the editor state. That's not always clear how to do that. Or the simplest way is kind of just to do it ahead of time. But with that, I'm gonna head off to Clay. Yeah.
We're running stuff in the notebook file, but on the compute node.
Yep.
I'm just curious how that relates to like your compute allowance in terms of like, or is the entire time that you have that VS Code open, is that feeding into your,
The entire time that the VS Code is open.
and just like running more or less during that? But like if you submit a job during that, is that more compute?
So when I submitted a job, I was on the free one. So if you submit jobs, like submit a bash script from within like your thing, it's its own sort of thing that might use resources. If you ask for the compute node version of VS Code, you are charged for the portion of resources that you use and for the time there. And so it depends on the partition you use. But those settings are in the kind of like form for requesting the compute node.
Is that why like on the Open OnDemand website, when you're like launching it and opening it, there's sort of this time remaining block that sort of like that it will default stop after an hour?
It will stop when there. It's kind of give you a warning there, but you're only charged for what you use. And if you're done using VS Code, but you want to not get charged for the rest of your time that you requested, you just hit delete, stop the job.
I just not understanding. If you just have it open and you have a notebook file open, but you're not running anything, then it's not.
You're charging. If you're on the compute node.
Can I try again?
Yes.
If you're using the interactive version of the app, it's free.
But
If you're using the compute version of the app, you are being charged as soon as you start the app until you close the app down.
it doesn't matter if you're like using
It
it.
doesn't matter what you're doing, because you've been allocated the resource, and therefore we're charging you.
Actually, let you end the session. If you just close the window.
To end the session on the OnDemand.
Yeah, like if you, it's out.
So like if I open VS Code, prepared my stuff and launched the job, but then I don't want to have the VS Code, like I don't want to be charged for the VS Code, so I want to close and delete the VS Code session. But I want to have still resources allocated for my job that I started from the terminal within this space. Is that possible?
We just keep the VS Code session open if we're using basically.
But if it's like a job of training my model
Like a
for
job that's running on a
days.
different set of nodes, you mean, than your.
Yeah, or like that's what I'm trying to differentiate.
And if you started a separate job for this VS Code section, just leave the other code running. If you are running the job in the compute section, you're just going to want to be.
So basically, like but that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like basically, we need to be careful about which compute nodes we're allocating for the job from within the session.
Any scripts that you submit as batch, kind of separate from like the request of the VS Code. But for now, I'll hand off to Clint, and he'll talk a little bit about kind of using LLMs and the AI agents to help code useful things.
This was so cool.
We have a question online while you guys are changing over. The question is, VS Code on Savio doesn't find pip. what should I do? I tried changing the Python environment.
I think if you're using the compute version of the VS Code app, I think if you include Python or potentially the Anaconda 3 module in the list of modules below, then I think it should find it. And for the interactive version, that's the same thing I told the other person here. Is I need to enhance that app so that you can load a module from VS Code in it.
Thank you.
So hopefully people online can hear me okay, as can people here.
Can you use the lapel mic?
It's on, is it not?
Okay.
Not, I don't know. Yeah. I'm trying to remember how to raise this little table here.
Other side. On the other, yep, right there. Keep going.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about GitHub Copilot. What is GitHub Copilot? Originally, GitHub Copilot was primarily doing code completions as a large language model. So, back in the day, maybe you were about to do NumPy NP dot random or something, and would give you sort of the options of things you could potentially be typing. Then with LLMs, it could say, hey, like we're going to give you a whole line of code that we think you're going to want to type. Or we're going to give you a whole function or multiple lines of code that we think you're going to want to type. And the feature set has increasingly expanded to where now there's like chat functions and editing functions and explaining functions. Copilot Chat, if you have a question about VS Code, not just the code that you're working on, like how to configure your VS Code environment, you can ask Copilot Chat. And so there are alternatives. One of those is continue. And so that's an alternative option. I'm focusing on GitHub Copilot largely because GitHub Copilot, if you're a student or a teacher, you can qualify for GitHub Education, which is free if you're one of those positions. And when you qualify for GitHub Education, you get access to GitHub Copilot for free, whereas otherwise it would charge you about $10 a month. So that's the reason we're focusing on GitHub Copilot. There are some issues, as sort of mentioned at the beginning. There's VS Code, and then there's Code Server. And Code Server is sort of not supported directly by Microsoft, which owns GitHub. And so GitHub doesn't really directly support Code Server. And so there's some issues. So some of the features I'm going to show today are working. I think we're going to be able to tweak the version and get the chat functionality working. But if you're trying to follow along, the chat functionality I'm going to demo is not working right at this moment. So please be advised. And if people are watching this in the future, because this is recorded, it is possible that Microsoft will make some sort of change, or I guess I should say GitHub will make some sort of change that could lead to reduced functionality or lack of compatibility in the future. Just hard to guarantee.
I thought I was using the chat on OOD like last week, but now
I just updated it, and so we need to just fix it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make sure I wasn't crazy.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll that fixed soon. Sorry for the convenience.
Thanks for being on.
And so I'm going to my here. And so, like I said, the fundamental building block, or sort of the easiest starting point into GitHub Copilot, is code completion. And so I'm just going to, I should take a more basic one.
Can you make the font size quite a bit?
That sounds like a good idea. So I'm going to start trying to ask Copilot to do, and make the font size bigger here, is that's and so you can see, so this is just sort of like a description of a simple game of rock, paper, scissors that I'm going to want to ask
Copilot to implement. And so if I hit enter a couple times, you're going to see that this import random appears. And this is called ghost text. And there's different things I can do. So sometimes Copilot will give you multiple options for something to fill in. This it thinks is a pretty clear case. So there's only one option. That's why it says 1 of 1. But if there were multiple options, I could tab through them using Alt and then right bracket. So, or I could use these arrows just by hovering over it.
So Clint, how did you get into having this code completion? What did you have to do to?
Okay, that is, yeah. Thanks, Chris. So I forgot to add that we have GitHub Copilot once we get it properly installed, but I think you should also see this now if you're logged in, because we have GitHub Copilot installed by default. It's not available in the App Store, unfortunately, so that's why we have it installed as a built-in with Code Server. You should find down here in the little accounts icon something that will say sign in to Copilot with GitHub. And once you click on that, it will basically walk you through a way of logging into Copilot with your GitHub account. And if you have GitHub Academic, then Copilot should basically work for you. There is a free version of Copilot, but it's very, very limited, like 50 completions or something. So as long as you qualify for GitHub Academic and if you want to use the service, I'd recommend getting off that. So you can see that, for instance, it says import random. And so if I want to just accept full suggestion, I can just do tab. Suppose that I only wanted import and I was going to want to do a different package. Then I can do control and right arrow that just accepts the word import, and then I could type something different. There's also the option of, suppose that this was a multiple line suggestion, I could just accept the singular line. So for purposes of this, I would just hit tab. And then basically, when you perhaps want to generate a larger completion, so I'm going to want to define a function. One, it's going to give me options like this. You can see this is sort of a pretty extensive just auto code suggestion it's giving me. But another option is I can hit Control Enter, and that will give me, it will essentially generate a couple or a number of different options for a larger completion. And then I can look at those and I can pick one of those. So here's first instance, here's the second case. You can see that, for my rock, paper, scissors game, it's giving me some, pretty complete options. And so I'll just choose this one here and hit accept suggestion. Yeah.
So over here, right? So you just log in with your GitHub Copilot in the bottom left, and then you just can create a new .py regular file, and literally you just wrote the regular Python comment with the description of what you want, and because the Copilot is connected to the file, it's already trying to help you without you even asking for anything.
Exactly. Once you have GitHub Copilot set up, it just says, just always trying to, if you pause and give it long enough to compute, it's going to start trying to give you suggestions. Yeah.
How much of the rest of your repository or file structure does it have access to by default? Can you change that setting?
So there is, I haven't played around with it extensively. It becomes a little bit more obvious in a second. So let me come back to that when I talk about the chat. I think here, for the most part, it's just focusing on the file I'm in, but it can access actually the larger workspace set of files as well. But typically, you have to prompt that using the chat function. Yeah, it might be. I haven't. They're pushing updates all the time, and so it's a more recent update. They might allow it to suggest edits in other files as well as you're going along, but I haven't personally had it suggest an edit to another file while I'm in this file, if that makes sense.
part of the thought that I have is also just like if you're building something that uses dependencies that you've built yourself in other files, there's just a question of like, does it know the whole dependency structure that you've built? And like, can it call not just like NumPy functions, but your own custom functions that have their own documented purposes?
Definitely has some ability to do that. I don't do that typically, so I'm not quite sure how good that is. I'll show you there's this at workspace, and that allows broader function. So just as an example, then I'm going to come down here and just write code to run the game. I can just hit the should just be able to hit the button to run it in terminal. And hopefully that doesn't embarrass me. It runs properly. When I tried this earlier, it wrote good enough function that it worked. But let's see here. Maybe I should. Let me try this one. Right, so maybe I just one more time. Hopefully it is having not personally written the code, that is one downside of AI code.
It's just stuck.
It's just trolling you right now. It knows you're trying to teach us.
So we'll not.
We believe you that it works.
We need to get Luis up there to debug using this code.
Yeah.
Why I just don't know why it's not
Can you try debugging actually?
running anything. It's not. I mean, it's not having an error, so there's nothing to debug. But just that it might be actually a.
It's like reloading the page help.
The
whole thing.
I'm not actually.
That's what happened actually if you just reload. Does it like save the changes and everything?
So I think it will. So let's. Let me see if that works. Okay, so there we go. I think it was just this was actually not related to the code. The code that Copilot ran fine. I think I just had some issues with the I wasn't using the interactive, which I'm used to. In this case, the run button will perfectly work. So you can see that basically it generates the sort of rock paper scissors code, and so I'm just playing against the computer, which is going at random, and then eventually I will either win or I will either lose. It looks like I'm going to lose this one. And I had the computer won. And so, basically you can see that's just a general function. And so now, suppose that I want to make changes to this function, or maybe I want more explanation. This is where Copilot Chat comes in. Copilot Chat is often the sidebar, or you can see that oddly the open chat doesn't populate here. Again, there's some compatibility issues perhaps. If you toggle the secondary sidebar, when we get things updated, you'll see that there is this Copilot Chat bar off to the side. And so you can do all sorts of chat here. One thing that can be really helpful to remember is the I have it in edit mode. So
I thought this was the only place you could add other files where you can like add context and you can direct it to other files that you want it to understand. I don't think that it can do it. My understanding is that it doesn't do it when you're in an actual document without the chat.
Yeah, and so so basically there is /help, and that will basically bring up a bunch of the sort of mostly the full set of commands you can see. And so one thing that you can do is you can use this @workspace command, which will basically look at your whole workspace. So that's sort of the way that you trigger Copilot to at your workspace as opposed to just the one that you're looking at, file you're looking at. If you want it to ask a question, like I said about VS Code settings, then you can use this at VS Code. That's basically how you tell Copilot you're going to want to ask a question about VS Code. Suppose that you're running something in your terminal like I did, and you have an issue, and you can use @terminal. And if you're trying to, if you're using GitHub and you had a question like, hey, like something about the changes in GitHub, you can also use @GitHub to trigger Copilot to answer questions about GitHub. And so in this case, a normal example that if we were doing this on a desktop version, I might be able to do would be to ask it to write a GUI for me. So ask it to write like it, make it pop up and then have buttons I could hit. Unfortunately, that is a that doesn't work here because we're just constrained to our web browser. But what I can do is I can ask, I can go down here to edit mode, and then I can basically just say, give the game a fruit theme and explain the game before playing. I haven't tried this particular prompt, but basically because I put it into edit mode, it's going to come up with some suggestions. And then once it's done, it's going to prompt me to accept those suggestions. And it's going to show like, the sort of classic Git looking red and green of what it's adding, what it's taking away. And so you can kind of see it is sort of putting the code off to the side, and it's applying edits in the main terminal window. I asked for something a little bit more extensive here, so it's taking a minute. I'm just going to hit keep and hope that everything is working properly. And then when I go to run the code again, it will. So I guess apple. Because now we have apple, banana, cherry, and so you can choose apple, banana, or cherry, and like that instead of rock, paper, scissors. And so basically, you can see it. Was able to go through and edit my code based on a prompt. Instead, I could have also asked it questions about the code. So I could say, where are the roots defined or something like that. Actually, what I should do is I could just do @workspace and then explain place. I could just put, explain the play game function. And then it will, okay, so closing range to, I think because I had some stuff highlighted, so you can see down here, it kind of tells you what the file context is, and I could add additional files if I wanted to see those. So if there was an issue with it seeing a file, you could definitely just drag your file over here to the add context window. And that would definitely be sure it would be able to look at your other file as well. I messed up here by highlighting it. It could see the full function. So if I try that again, now that it's looking at the full current file, I go @workspace and do the explain modifier, explain a game. Then I think it will, yeah, I see.
To confirm which exactly function you're doing.
Yeah, I think it was trying to look where my guess is it was something about I wanted to call down here, look at function. It didn't used to have, it's one of the newer features, so not quite as familiar. There are also great VS Code support videos on YouTube that you can check out if you always want to be familiar with the latest features. They keep those pretty up to date and took inspiration from some of them. And so you can see that here it basically explains what's going on in that function. Any questions?
I guess I had two questions. I guess the first question, so the app workspace, is that telling it that it can see all the files in the workspace, or is that just telling it like we're in the workspace and then you have to manually tell it every file that you want to look into? Ask in part because I thought that at workspace would let it just see everything in the workspace, and I tried this last week, and then it clearly wasn't able or willing to open any of the files. And so it just like, well, here's the files that there are. I'm like, no, I'm asking you to actually do something in there.
But it's a different, like, I think it's also, I have had issues in general with opening functionality. So you're asking it, one, to look at the files, but two, you're asking it to open something in the IDE or whatever.
Well, I was just trying to see if I could get it to do the kind of thing that's useful for me.
No,
which
I'm
is
saying like maybe
read
it's
a
also
big-
two issues. One issue is like, does it have access to the files and can it read it and can it make informed decisions about what you're asking
Sure,
it to do?
sure.
Versus the ability to actually open things up in the environment. But I'm not saying like, I'm not answering. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
I see two problems already happening potentially.
So just for perspective, so I just asked what files it's able to see. And you can see that it is able to supposedly use 4 references from my work. So just to be clear, that is just all the files I have in my current
You want
workspace.
to ask it to open it?
I think it is actually, sort of VS Code. Let's see. See if,
So Clint, we are getting to the.
oh, that's true. But I think that was for functionality, auto completion, chat, and you can actually basically ask the chat any question. I didn't get to. So
Question. VS Code Insider lets you do like, LLM agent stuff like Cursor. Is it possible to do that on Code Server? I think it's like VS Code Insider, to my understanding, is just like a separate like version of the VS Code application that you can get.
I think I thought VS Code Insider was essentially the like beta or alpha build of VS Code. And so you can think of this as actually, we just updated this. So it is, I think, actually they updated a new version of VS Code today. So it's already 1 generation behind. Okay. But like a sub generation. So it will be at whatever version we have loaded currently. So unfortunately, there's not the.
Today was up today.
Yeah. But I think now it's 4.994 and this is 4.993.
Whenever the insider features eventually end up in the main VS Code, then eventually they'll end up in here.
Exactly.
Very cool.
Unless there are any questions that need to be addressed in the chat. I think
You mean the Copilot chat?
the Zoom chat, but I think it looks like people have been getting answers. So
I think we're okay there.
thanks to Mark and Chris answering questions. Thanks to Luis for listening with me, and thanks to everybody for joining. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us via email or at our twice-weekly office hours.
We'll leave the Zoom open for a few minutes in case anybody online has other questions they want to ask.